Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's the 2nd of February in bulk in some circles, and I am going to guide a talk and a teaching this evening on ghosts. We're calling it Ghosts Among the Living. And the intent is to understand a little more about them and why they matter and how we might bring awareness to this whole other domain of suffering and complexity and relationship. So we'll cover all that in 60 minutes very thoroughly. Let me offer a prayer because I like to do it that way. And we'll do a little bit of embodied practice in the hour anyways. So if you don't mind being in whatever is a centered spiritual kind of place for you, that's great and contributes to a good overall energy. So I give acknowledgement to the source and mystery within and through all things. I give acknowledgement to my own ancestors of blood and to the ancestors here in these lands of La Suya, Granada, Andalusia. I give acknowledgement to the other powers that walk with me and to the ancestors of those present and those listening in later. I give acknowledgement to the big, good, living earth that is also us, and ask that this time be connective, that I be a good teacher, and that there be a ripple of remembrance and kindness and positivity and love for those who may feel forgotten or who are continuing to suffer after the death of their body. May we have some good things to say about them, some kind things. Thanks. Shane. So, hey, thanks for your trust, for spending an hour together here. If there's a guiding question, also pardon the cough. I'm still recovering from COVID and bronchiolitis and every other thing. So I may just cough a bit. If there's a guiding question that I'd like you to hold in your awareness for our hour, it's something like, what are our ethical or moral obligations to the dead, including those who suffer? Before we get into that, briefly, I want to say a thing about what's happening with Ancestral Medicine. It's like the public service announcement, but sincerely, we have a course on ancestral lineage healing that's open and starts this weekend, and it's our foundational course. Some of you may have taken it or looked at it before, but it's newly energized in the sense that I'll be teaching more. So there's 12 live teachings. All those still have breakout groups with supporters, including options for affinity spaces for BIPOC, LGBTQ, Jewish, Black only folks. And in addition to that, in addition to the course being re-energized a bit with new themes, there's also a workbook that we created, which is kind of fancy and nice. So same course, but like new cool content. So that's happening if you want to step in with ancestral work. I'm teaching a course on joy in March. It really stretches me. I'm kind of glad about it, but my goodness, it's not my usual aesthetic or something. And so that'll be happening. And then finally, a reminder that the practitioner training, the 6th, 7th, one of those, we're doing the 6th one now, will begin at the end of 2023, but the application will be open in just a few weeks. And so I'm doing a public talk about that, I think on the 16th of February. So all that will be along soon, and connect if you wish. Yeah, good. I'm hearing, getting a message that I'm not loud enough. Is the sound okay? It's good enough? Okay. Yeses, no's, more yeses than no's. I think this is what I got. Let me do a quick glance there. I could probably crank it up a bit, but yeah, that's what I got, unfortunately. Let me do one last check. Yep. Okay. So I'm going to proceed and I'll try to speak up a little bit. Okay. Very briefly, for folks who have never encountered me in any way, I like to know a little bit like, who is this person I'm listening to? So very succinctly, I'm down lineage from early German and English settler colonialist ancestors to North America. I lived there for a long time. I lived in North America and the United States until September. I live now with my wife and our 2 young girls in Andalusia in southern Spain. And I wasn't raised with any of this stuff that I teach about, but I sought it out as a young person. And so I've studied a lot about religion and spirituality and those kind of things. And I also got a PhD in psychology and a license to work with the human psyche. I'm a therapist, so got that along the way, but mostly I'm a ritualist. I happen to have a specialization, which I found me, I guess you'd say, in working with the ancestors, with the human dead. It's not the only thing I'm up to, but it's definitely a main thing. And that's included training others in how to guide those kinds of practices. So I'll leave it at that. I'll say that this long kind of love affair with the ghosts, with the dead, with the troubled dead in particular, it has been really formative for my whole life, like for my life, my sense of self, for my sense of purpose in the world. I joke, but it's not really joking that I work for them. And I feel a sense of deep like loyalty and like non-abandonment and care for them. Because culturally we're really, I'm generalizing here, I know it's not everybody, but generally we're really tanking this topic and not extending regular, consistent care for those who die, and is creating a lot of additional problems when we have plenty to sort out right now on Earth. So let's get into that a bit. If we start with like, who are the ghosts? What do you mean by that? I'll sometimes refer to them as the troubled dead, the dead who are not yet at peace, or the not yet ancestors. And before getting into that, the bigger mess is really that there's a pervasive way of seeing the world. Whether or not you hold this frame, you've certainly encountered it, which says that only living humans are real, like fully real. And other like animals, plants, pets, deities, all the other possible kinds of creatures there are in the world, visible and invisible, either they're not real, there's something you should keep to yourself because that's like a private religious thing, or it's just foolish to believe in that. Like made me so mad, really, but briefly. But my daughter, she's 5. She goes to a nice progressive, like bilingual school here. And there were cards, little laminated cards the other day in the pictures. And one of the like vocabulary things she was learning was like non-living. I was like, what are you applying that to? Do you mean mountains? Do you mean like houses? Do you mean like, what are non-living things? Why are you reinforcing this binary of alive, not alive with my 5-year-old? Stop indoctrinating the children with this really hard split in Western civilization that cuts us off from the rest of life, if you don't mind, like, come on. But the ghosts, I'll circle back on that, but the ghosts in general I use that to refer to those among the dead, the souls and the spirits of the dead who are not yet at peace. So when we die, the way I understand it, at least, is that it's the start of a rite of passage. Maybe it starts a little bit before that, but it's the embarking on the next phase of our reality or consciousness or journey. And just dying alone doesn't get us there. There's a need to move through some stages or layers. Different traditions will give different nuance to that, but there's almost always some sense of a journey or a change of consciousness or different kinds of realities one might encounter in a process of eventually getting to a more stabilized understanding or in a more stabilized condition. Generally speaking, that's arriving with the ancestors. So you die, you're like, whoa, I just died. Then there's a period after that. usually from a few weeks to a few months to a year of the in-between period. Maybe it goes quickly for you if you're already quite awake before you physically die. Maybe it takes longer than a year if you get stuck. The ghosts are the ones where things aren't really moving along there. They're stuck somehow. So you can think of them as the ones who started but have not yet finished the rite of passage to become an ancestor. So I'm using the word ancestor here to refer to those among the dead who are relatively at peace. They're with the other ones among the dead who are well and at peace. They understand they're dead. They're basically safe to relate with. They can be tricky and pushy and all kinds of things, but they're categorically basically safe. And they're not confused about what's going on. We want that to happen for us when we die. You don't want to get in a stuck, confused state. So the ghosts are like the ones between, if you will. And that can happen. Like you can stay stuck for a long time. And so why should that matter? Well, for one, if it's the case that we've been sold the story, again, I'm generalizing, it might not apply to you. We've been sold the story that it's really only the living humans who are the only people in town. And that story is actually not true. It's not like it's got a kind of heavy, funky energy. It's actually like false. Like if someone's like, there are no such thing as microorganisms because you can't see them. And then you get out a microscope and you're like, no, look, they were there the whole time. And so even if we stop giving respect and acknowledgement to the consciousness, the soul, the reality that we are after the death of the body, because we've internalized this kind of materialistic, reductionistic, I'm so clever and educated mindset. So there's a period of time that passes where we stop acknowledging the rest of life. In that whole period of time, the rest of life keeps on going. So then you end up with a backlog. And that's what I was born into. I'm like, what's up? White kid in Ohio, like growing up with no context. And then I get into shamanic practice and, getting high and trancing out and doing things. And I'm like, whoa, there's a bunch of stuff I wasn't told about. I want to understand it. And the spirits are kind of like, you do? I'm like, I mean, yeah, I think so. They're like, great. It's actually very sad. I'm like, okay, I'll still take it. It's not sad forever, but there's a backlog, right? And so part of why this should matter to us is because if the dead have their own reality and we haven't been acknowledging it, it's a moral failure. It's a problem. There's a problem about being ethical and kind. If you suddenly realize after generations of treating children like unintelligent, like receptacles of culture to be shaped by adult agendas, if you suddenly realize, oh, these are just like shorter people at a developmental stage that's different than mine, that's an important shift. And the whole time you were holding that other objectifying view, they were still really sensitive people. So now you have a cultural backlog with some centuries of traumatized adults who were related with badly as kids. So it matters because we want to have a commitment to truth. That's one reason. Another selfish reason, which is a totally good reason to take some interest in the topic of the dead, is because the dead, both the ones who are doing awesome and the ones who are a mess still, have considerable levels of impact on the living. And this doesn't, for me, like this feels as just matter of fact as saying microorganisms have impact on the living. It's not like a matter of belief, really. If I'm like, the sun is in the sky, they're like, you can fight with it, but it's hot. Like, I've seen it. And so the dead, the dead influence us, for one, because we're not ultimately separable from them. We're not individuals. It's not like they're discreetly over there and we're discreetly over here in our tidy little individual like bubbles. That's not how reality is organized. And so they influence us like the roots influence the leaves. It's one organism. And they influence us in discrete ways, in ways like, in my time when I was working as a therapist, I've seen a lot of clients for like ancestral healing work and other kinds of stuff over the years. I would say that like well over half of what adult humans that I've encountered tend to suffer with can be usefully understood as ghost interference. Whether it's intergenerational pain and trauma that hasn't been metabolized yet from their family lineages, so it's just recreating and recreating, or direct interference from mom or grandma or brother or great grandmother or whoever who died and never left. They're supposed to cross the waters, but they waded in. They didn't have a boat. They had a confused life, so they turned around. And now they still live at home. They just don't have a body, and they draw energy from the living. Ghosts are, if you were a ghost, you would do that too, for one. I'm not judging them. It's just, in what I'm describing is really matter-of-fact, basic stuff for a lot of how people see the world in places that haven't lost this framework. It's just unusual to see like an educated American white guy talking about it. So people show up per talk. And so the ghosts, if you were a ghost, you would draw on the energy of those around you. I mean, that's people who are acting ghosty, or who are basically acting from a ghost-like consciousness but like I'm talking about incarnate living people. That's what they do. They're like, someone comes into the room and you're like, oh, this person, I feel drained when I'm around them. Yeah, they're actually pulling energy from your system. That's why you feel drained. And the dead would do that too, because they don't have the ability to eat the bodies of plants and animals and the sunlight and the earth and the life force that comes with that. We have mouths. They don't have mouths in the same way. And so a lot of the behavioral issues with kids are from ghosts. A lot of the mental illness that people experience is exacerbated by ghost interference, not to mention the massive amounts of childhood trauma and systemic oppression and et cetera. But the systems that perpetuate white supremacy and exploitative like capitalism and poverty and sexism and colonialism and, name your systemic poison. Those systems are created by bad human choices and perpetuated by this stuck, ghosty heaviness that makes them harder to change than they already would be. So we're kind of swimming in it. It does not have to be that way. When the culture, any given culture, is functioning well, it's part of caring for people to make sure that the dead reach a good condition after the death of the body. So in any case, a second reason besides like the commitment to being honest and truthful is the ghosts matter because they impact us. We could have a whole different talk about how the dead, who are awesome and vibrant and well, are a source of guidance and protection and joy, and there's all the good stuff too. But this is not what I'm talking about tonight. I'm talking about this whole realm of suffering we tend to overlook. The two other reasons why it's rational and encouraged to look at this stuff. One is that it is morally problematic to ignore them. I know I said this earlier, and if I said, name your group, you should take this whole demographic of humans and start pretending like they don't exist. No, really, you should do it. Let's all pretend like they don't exist. Everyone's going to be like, whoa, man, that's really problematic. We should not do that. That would be a bad choice. But when we overlook the reality of the dead, we're doing just that. And so if any given culture or family or group or individual, and it's not always from bad intent, like most people I know are good people, they just don't think about this because they didn't get a framework for it. So I don't mean to have a judgmental edge to it. When I'm being judgy, I'm talking about the whole culture and how it's tending like to fail people. And so if I said, when someone turns 60, we should all pretend like they don't exist anymore. Be like, no. But the implicit message is when someone dies physically, the relationship with them and the care for them at that point, which is actually a confusing moment for a lot of people if they haven't looked at their own death, the care for them often stops, and the community will collapse back into a focus on the living and cease to dialogue with the one who's died and cease to assist them. Some people will go so far as saying that the funeral is mostly about the living. Let us care well for the living and our grieving. But funerals traditionally are a send-off for the dead, like an act of great concentrated communal care for the dead at a point when they really need often that extra boost and reflection and send-off to begin their next reality. And so it's just wrong to drop people at that moment. People don't stop existing when the body dies. It's not a religious thing. And the last reason is because we're talking about people that we love and care about. Sometimes we're talking about strangers. Sometimes it's people we don't like, or somebody who like, you had a really annoying neighbor and then they die, and then you're like, oh geez, now they're a ghost. Should I help? I guess I should not be petty. So maybe it's people you don't like, but often it's people you love. Like your child dies, your sister dies, your friend dies, your grandma dies. You want to do right by them. Doing right by them includes being curious if they have made their journey to the next reality. And if they have not done that yet, give them a minute to work it out on their own. Don't be like, hurry up. Are you there? Are you there? Are you there? Like, I died yesterday. Don't push too hard on people. But if they haven't made it, if they're stuck, if they're confused, if you have a dream and they're like, I'm drowning, I need your help. You don't wake up and be like, oh, was that about a part of me? Be like, no, that's them saying, I'm drowning, I need your help. Help them. If they called you when you were alive and they were like, I just got in a car accident, I'm injured, this is where I'm at, help me. You wouldn't hang up the phone and be like, oh, that was just a part of me that called me. That would make you like a non-responsive friend. And so I'm saying the reality of the people we care about doesn't end when their body dies. We get that on some level. But the conditioning that comes into tension with it sometimes would delay or block us from acting to extend our love and care when we know that there's an opportunity to do that. So what do we actually do? We'll talk about what to do. And then we'll take a few minutes in practice. I'll just share a few other points, and then we'll see if there are some questions. I made note of excuse me, a half dozen things that we might do as general guidelines, because the topic is really a big one. If I said, well, what do you do about the living? Well, it depends what's happening. The living do a lot of things, but so what do you do about the dead? Specifically when the dead are a mess. The first thing is you have healthy boundaries with them. It's very important. I don't, this is my day job. I train people to navigate this terrain. I don't seek to or wish to relate directly with the troubled dead. It's totally possible to do it. It's easily possible to do it, consciously or unconsciously. And I actually advise against it. I am a big fan of relating as much as you care to with the ancestors, those who are safe, vibrant, healed, well, and they've made the transition to the next reality. That's an easy pathway of connection if you want to cultivate it. But those who are in between, it's not needed. It's not needed to be helpful to them. The methodology which I teach and which I encourage in the world is calling in assistance for those who are in need, but not risking getting entangled in those situations yourself. So there's a ritual safety piece, which is to have healthy boundaries with the dead who are suffering. Yeah. How to do that is I think I'd touch on in other talks. It's a bigger topic. And people need different pieces of how to do that. A second thing, if you want to learn how to be tangibly helpful in a more kind of focused way with the dead who are not yet at peace, start with your own lineages. Really, start with your own family lineages. That's exactly what we do in the course. That's what the practitioner directory of almost 200 people now in the practitioner network, that's what they're trained to do, is to guide sessions for other people to connect with their own ancestors, connect with those who are already healed, and partner with them to heal up those ones who are not yet well. So start by learning about this terrain through making sure your own relatives are in a really healed state. And if you check in and you're like, they already are, they're so good, well, then great. Then don't fix them. Then just hang out with them. But often when people tune in, they're like, it's about as complicated as I thought it would be. Well, yeah, then there's some work to do. That's your training ground. Start there. Otherwise, if you're like, I'm motivated to help some ghosts. Let's bring it. Like, come on, ghosts. And that prayer works. Like, don't take that approach. But if you take that approach and it works, your own people are probably going to be like, really? Like, if you need ghosts, we got those. You don't have to shout. They're already in your house. So like, start close to home. A third thing is whatever your practices are around prayer and things like it, do that. Pray for them. The suffering is really, it's really deep among the ghost realms. And these are also, it's nuance, but these are also the realms that sometimes get talked about as like hell in some versions of Abrahamic faiths, or the ghost realms, the like troubled aspects of the Bardo and all that, some of the Buddhist teachings, but talked about differently in different traditions. But the depth of the sorrow and the pain and the loneliness and the confusion, it's really, really so much. And you're not going to resolve it all. So you know where it lives within you. And you pray for mercy for all the suffering. And you have it, and you find your place of tenderness around it. Because you can't roll up and be like, spiritual light has come, and like be all like cavalier. It's not how you roll up to the ghosts. There's a ethic of humility and compassion that I would encourage anyone who wants to be of care in this terrain to bring. And otherwise we get into this, like the shadow side of healing, where like you're coming, you want to be helpful, but you're really relating with them like this kind of annoying skin condition, and like you're trying to be like the lotion. You're like, go away, like I love you, like may you be healed / go away. What a terrible, like subtle message to send. That's really different than like, I'm so like sorry you're hurting. Like it must be really hard to be invisible to your family and to have a 24/7 endless dream of confusion where you're replaying your old memories and it's cold in a way that you can't get warm. That sounds super hard. I wonder if me and my people can help you in some way. I'm not sure, but maybe if we sit with it together, it'll become clear. Yeah, that's different than I'm going to heal you, right? So mind how you come up on the topic that matters. And this last thing is about the manner in which people die. I said I would speak to it in the talk tonight. I know there's questions about it. People tend to have a lot of questions, specifically if what happens if someone takes their own life, things like that. So I'll try to say a thing about that. I don't think it's a good idea to generalize too much about suicide, because when someone very intentionally engages in physician-assisted suicide at the end of life from a place of lucidity, and it's just like, this is how I want to go out, I'm going to choose this. That's very different from someone who's had a otherwise balanced life, but is in a really reactive and intense, difficult place, makes an impulsive choice. And that's really different from someone who is just tormented regularly over a long period of time. And they're like, I can't do it anymore, and steps out. And, there are many different kinds of scenarios. But what I would say in a generalizing way is, from my observation, it's not from a moral stance. I don't have any interest in weighing in morally on it. I would say that when people take their own life, often, not always, it's confusing for the one who's done that, because they were seeking to end a kind of suffering or a kind of state, and consciousness doesn't actually end. And that, in that way, it's usually ineffective at what it aims to achieve in terms of ending suffering. And that alone tends to contribute or increase the odds that the one who has recently died will have a period of confusion or even regret often enough after that. Not always, it depends. I don't have the view that things are fundamentally different otherwise. You can die from 1,001 other means and still have a confusion after your death. So the process of assisting those who have died in that particular manner is not different than the process of assisting the dead generally, which is partner with helpful powers, carefully assess what's going on, and let those elder helpful powers discern what kind of intervention or need is going to be safe and helpful. So it's the same basic process. But when I hear that someone's taken their own life, my first association is just there's a good chance that they didn't transition that well after that. It's like they entered the post-death journey in a rocky way. Yeah. And there's usually heaviness or suffering that precedes that. To state that another way, the more confused and troubled a person is at their time of death, the more the larger community is needed to rally around them, to bring love and care and intervention, so that there's not a new ghost, so that there's not someone now who is no longer incarnate, but has not made it through the journey to the ancestors. And so it's in the well-being, it's in the best interest of the community of the living to really tend to that person until they have been woven in. And in that way, the best long-term fix for the ghost problem is to stop making new ghosts, meaning help people to transition when they die. There's actually a really easy cultural way to do that, is to start having, if you're not already having them, I'm not suggesting it doesn't go well, sometimes it does, but start having really effective funerals. I mean, of course, the bigger fix is like be ethical, be just, make massive repairs for centuries of colonialism and stop with the ecological catastrophe and the racism. And I mean, like, stop behaving so badly, humans. Oh my goodness. So that's like the big fix. But, aren't we all hopefully working on that problem? But more specifically, that would help with the ghosts, by the way, like less childhood trauma to start with. But more specifically, when someone dies, it should be like part of what any given community, even if you're like very committed to your atheism, doesn't matter. I'm not talking about being theistic or like having some doctrine or whatever. It's not a religious thing here. It should be just part of the program where you're like, well, I want to make sure the folks who've died are at peace. So what needs to happen for that to occur? There's 10,000 different ways it can occur, but that it occurs is what matters. So if we did that, within a short amount of time, the whole balance would shift on things. And the children are the ancestors returning as well. So you want to have healthier children being born, make sure the ones who are coming back are well. Like, tend to the ancestors. They're the same group. There's no past or future. It's just the same pool of, consciousness coming in, coming out. So, yeah. Let me say that. It's a little bit, I know the vibe's kind of heavy. Why don't we bring it to practice and invite a moment in a resourced and non-edgy way of prayer here, because that's really the sweet spot when we have a larger group of folks present. I'll talk you through that for about 10 minutes. There's a few other things I want to say briefly, and then we'll open up space for questions, and I'm happy to stay a little bit after as well if there are questions. I imagine there will be. So, okay. So go ahead and find your center. I'll talk you through it. Notice your heart, your belly, your feet. Maybe use your breath to bring your attention to an embodied place. And from there, notice your connection to the sacred, to love, to the helpful spirits, God, the earth, however it is for you. Attune to your connection to the greater, and let that be present with you in some way. And while that is happening, take a minute to confirm that your personal space is clear and free from interference. And hold the intent that it's like that, and that you're in a protected, contained space. And from that place of center, staying rooted in your body, in your circle of protection, just notice that there are many among the dead who you already have a connection with, especially ancestors of blood, but others as well, for all kinds of reasons. Where you live, the cultural elements you're connected to, the people you're connected to. And notice that some of those ones are really vibrant and amazing and loving and safe and healed. And some that you're connected to are other than that. It's complicated. They're still in process. Just notice outside your circle that we're all just tangled up with others in that way. So noticing what is. And from that place of noticing, I want to ask you to invite those who are vibrant and healed and loving in general to just draw a bit closer to the outside of your circle. And those who are still in need, those who are troubled in any way, take just a step back to allow for that shift or reorganization. So you're just gently affirming an alignment with those among the dead who are safe and healed and allowing them to draw closer. But from that place of noticing your own center, your own heart, and that there's goodness among those who have passed, see if it can arise in an authentic way to just hold a prayer with these ones on behalf of those who still suffer. You're not drawing them close to you. You're not trying to connect with those ones who are suffering. But for all those who are still lost at sea, those who are in a state of confusion, those who died in suffering and who continue in suffering, may they find their way home. May they find support and peace. May there be remedy. May they be remembered. See if you can just hang out in this place of compassion and acknowledgement for these others. Not drawing them close to you, just wishing them well. Stay connected in your prayer to your own center, staying rooted in your circle, staying connected to the support and kindness around you. That's the holding of both. You're staying resourced, connected to love, and letting a prayer arise for all those who are just really tangled up inside and no longer in a body, even. So hard to get leverage. You might take a moment if it's comfortably available and see if there's just a little bit of entrainment that's possible. There's almost 500 people on the call now, and more than half are probably engaging in this practice. And so notice if there's a bit of group compassion and kindness and care that can reverberate out. This is a totally wholesome adult way to spend our time praying for the suffering of the world to find remedy. May those in your specific lineages who have known suffering and still know it, those who you have experienced in your body in that way, may they find relief. And staying with it, if you're moved, but start to allow if there's intensity, start to allow that to kind of ground out a bit. And invite you to wonder, like, how would it be to walk with this prayer in your life in a regular way? Maybe you already do. But if you don't, try it on for a moment. And maybe if it feels authentic, there's some affirmation that when opportunities arise to extend awareness and care for the dead, that you'll attend to those opportunities when they arise, when they're right for you. So you give acknowledgement to the larger ongoing conversation. And at your own rhythm, go ahead and transition out of the space of practice, staying rooted the whole time in your body, giving acknowledgement to the powers that support you. I want to say a few things before we open it up for questions. You probably get this, but it's a topic that I'm not neutral about. Actually, I have a lot of strong feelings about this terrain. It's important to me. It's personal. And it's been interesting for me, like on an ego level, but then on other levels too, to be teaching publicly ancestral healing work since 2004, and then to notice in the last 19 years how it's become more popular, and how that is, I mean, in some places it's just like been what's happening the whole time, which is great. But I mean, in places where it was previously forgotten or lost as a focus for the most part. And mostly that is really good. And let me affirm very clearly that there's a ton of people doing really great work, the vast majority of whom I have no idea what they're doing. And like, I'm sure they're doing great work. So fantastic. If you're one of those people, carry on. Thank you. Oh my goodness. It's a heavy lift. There's a lot of work to be done. Carry on. And I want to speak a little bit to a concern that arises for me around some of what I see happening with ancestral healing. And the heart of the concern is really, does this approach from this group, this individual, whatever, is it an approach that actually fully and without a doubt legitimizes the reality of the dead, their voices, their agency, their personhood, and the continuity of like the souls and spirits of the dead? Are the ancestors real? If that's not a decisive yes, you should back up from the topic a little bit and make sure that it is your calling to be leading something in this terrain. I know that's not a neutral thing to say, so let me unpackage what I mean, because I don't want to seem judgmental and dismissive. But if the ancestors themselves are viewed as energy patterns, psychological process, just our ideas about them, or something other than full people and others with a voice and agency and choice, I see it as a problem for a couple of reasons. One, it reinforces the loneliness of the dead. And that's not kind. If you're in relationship with someone and all they see from you is what you mean to them only, we have mean words in psychology for that. I mean, narcissism is one of them, like kindness to people suffering with narcissistic patterning. But it's if you're relating with someone who only sees you through the lens of what like you are to them, that's lonely. Is that a real basis for a relationship? A second thing is it reduces the amount of ritual safety, typically. And the dead who are not at peace can be as harmful as the living who are not at peace. And you've probably noticed that humans are the most dangerous animal and creature on the earth, probably beyond at this point. And I'm a big fan of humans. Like, I giggle with our kids. I love myself, and I know, like, it's like I'm a happy person for the most part. I'm moody but happy. And but I'm saying humans are dangerous, Like, when I think about our kids, I'm like, yeah, don't trip, don't eat that, don't play with the sharp thing, but like, watch out for the humans, really. And so the dead are just as hazardous, and they're just as awesome because they're just people. But if we see the dead even a little bit as just aspects of ourselves, as just bigger energy patterns, just psychological process, we're going to miss that. And that puts people in danger, and that's not okay. And finally, and this is more of a principled thing, if any given person's approach to ancestral engagement or ancestral healing doesn't legitimize the reality of the dead fully, period, it risks perpetuating a reductionistic, colonialist, materialist view of the world that says living humans are the only kind of people. And that view is in unto itself harmful, and it's also really tangled up with histories of empire, of white supremacy, of cultural arrogance and exploitation. And it's it's bad to perpetuate that. It's 2023. We need to cut it out with that view. It's not working. It's getting really bad results on the earth. And the alternatives to that view that affirm the beautiful personhood and reality of the earth, the plants, the animals, the spirits, the dead, etc. Those frameworks are so totally available. There's no need to keep perpetuating the lonely story that we're the only thing with consciousness. It's not, it's not trending anymore. I mean, well, maybe it unfortunately is, but like time to give it a rest. So I say that, sure, I could be like the grouchy, judgy spiritual teacher guy, but where I really want to come from with that is this topic matters a lot to me, and I want it to be safe and effective for people when they engage with it. And that means taking it really seriously, actually, and understanding that the dead have their full reality. They're as real as you or I. We're looking in the mirror with them. And our side of the mirror is not more real than theirs. From their perspective, we're the dead. Like yeah, they're real in common English. And it's important that how we approach the topic of resolving ancestral pain and harm and all that, and transforming that into beauty and goodness, it's important that those practices, which are needed and which are abundant and which are great, that they're proceeding from that basic validation of the different parties involved. That's it. That feels important. Within that, there's 1,000 effective, beautiful ways for it to go. I know we're at time for the hour. I want to make space for questions and follow the lead on those questions. I'm happy to hang out. And if you're not able to hang out, but you want to listen to what happens with the Q&A, you'll get the recording after sent to you. Briefly, I'll just remind that if you want to dive in with all this, the Ancestral Healing course is really the probably the most useful thing I've done with my life so far. I mean, the book's the same thing. It's the same material, basically. So if you want to learn how to navigate this, the course is designed for that. There's a lot of great supporters for it as well. So yeah, as a very final thing, I hope the care and tenderness is mostly what comes through, and not the heavy, grouchy, opinionatedness, although I'm sure that's in the mix. So thank you, everybody, for your care and attention. And the chat is kind of blowing up a little bit. I'm not going to be able to engage it and stay connective. So I'm going to favor going to people who raise their hand. If I call on you by taking you off mute, if you don't mind, just real briefly say where you're calling in from, and then try to go to the heart of the question, because there's probably a number of people who would like to ask a thing. And I'll try to get to the chat, but I can't get too sucked in with it. So I just took somebody off mute if you want to say a question.
Hi, my name is Tikanya. I'm from what is called Canada, Turtle Island. My question is, I have one side of my lineage that's very healed, and I've connected with my maternal grandmother, who has a beautiful, colorful owl spirit in the spirit world, and loving, and has supported a lot of people after her passing. On my other side, I have German ancestors who were in Nazi Germany at the time of the war, and are extremely traumatized and extremely messed up, and it's been making me sick. So how do you deal with that when your ancestors are making you sick from their trauma and you still want to help them, and maybe the barriers are not as good as they should be?
Yeah. It's a great question. It's a common one. Thank you for bringing it in. The features or aspects of how I approach this, I mean, different people give you different answers, but how I approach it and what we do in the course, for example, is the very first thing is assessing what's going on, just intuitively looking at it. And you're saying, I already know my mother's people are healed or pretty healed or, good stuff. Other side, I think you said it was your father's side. Less good, lots of historic bad acting out in recent time and all kinds of mess and heaviness and interference. And so the first step is all about setting boundaries with the dead. Like, we're going to be helpful and we're going to come in and get out. Everybody get the fuck out of the room. And then we'll figure out who is permitted to come back in after that, but clear it out. That's the first step. Because often if we don't have a framework, it's a mix of things happening, usually in our immediate space. And the second thing, let's say, is it your father's lineage? I don't want to get it wrong when I'm responding to you. Yeah. Oh, you might be back on mute. I'll keep it in a general way. So the lineage that to be troubled. The next step is not to connect at all with the recent ones, but to go to the way farther back ones, as far back as you need to go. And yes, before remembered names, before the last few centuries, to connect with those on the lineage who are healed and are well. And maybe you end up, because they're, ostensibly they're Germanic folks, you end up pre-Roman Empire. And you're like, oh, Romans were really terrible to Germanic tribes. Oh, like what happened before that? What happened before that? And at a certain point, you're like, wow, healthy, vibrant, loving, not even Nazi at all, grandfathers way back. That's your important connection point. Because what happens then is you partner with those ones to start to surround the area of trouble. And that might be many generations of trouble between them and you. And then there's a gradual systematic process of healing up the lineage. And what you can do is, let's say you come to the generation of your great-great-grandfather who that's theoretically lived before the mess that was World War I, that kind of broke Germany and made everything blown out and susceptible to fascism even more. And so you connect with that older grandfather until he's in a healed state. And then the case of the last few generations has a container in which to find healing, because it's the elder men who need to receive the ones who acted out so badly on that lineage. And you can't do that personally. You can facilitate the intervention of those ones, and that's different. But at no point does that include relating directly with any of the troubled stuff. You have a strong boundary with it the whole time. Does that, I don't see you on the screen. I don't know if you're still on the call, but hopefully that responds. And thank you for asking that. I know that's a question a lot of people have. I see Francesca, I think it is.
Yes, Francesca, I'm calling from near Boston, Massachusetts, United States. Mm-hmm. I think you said it, but I just want to confirm. My two sons have passed, one 16 years ago and one this past November. And I'm signed up for the course, so I'm anxious to start that. And I never thought about them as ancestors, but recently I'm realizing that I think there's some truth there, that they're going to have wisdoms that I don't. And so, and I guess I'm wondering, I don't know where they are. I mean, sometimes I feel it, but I guess I'm trying to figure out, like, okay, can they be ancestors already? And how do I know if they're okay?
Thanks for bringing that. That's a lot. to live kindness.
Mhm.
Yes, they can be ancestors already. No, it's not a given that they are, but they, they can be. I tend to invite people, if it doesn't feel too like clinical or Germanic, I like to blame it on my German ancestors, but my dad and brother, both engineers, but to use a 1 to 10 scale when thinking about the dead. So the higher, the better. So the 1 to 3 range is like like that doesn't feel safe and good at all. The 4 to 6 is like you don't seem hazardous, but I wouldn't choose you as a babysitter kind of range. It's like normal ghosts. And then the 7 to 10 is like, oh, you're an ancestor. Hi, like this feels nice. And then the 8, 9, that's like, whoa, I'm in the presence of a big spiritual something. Like, hi, am I supposed to bow? Like that kind of vibe gets into that spectrum. So they, like all of us, the living, the dead, can be anywhere on the spectrum, so to speak. And the way I tend to think of it, and I knew this in the abstract, but now I have 2 kids, but there's no child soul exactly. Like the souls are, they're spirits. The ones who come to earth are just spirits. Some of them seem a bit more senior or elder or wise already, and some of them are less like that. And but over time, there's a veil and a container of personality that kind of forms and everything. So when someone's like a teenager or 20 or 30, then it's different. But you can see it especially with folks who die young, and their personality hasn't really like congealed, like they haven't formed a strong self yet. And so what returns is like, it's so clearly still like an adult soul, if you will, because it hasn't been made into a child consciousness yet. It hasn't been here long enough. But the longer we're dead, and especially the more settled we are with the ancestors, the less age while alive on earth is the defining thing.
Okay.
In other words, yes, they can be ancestors. If they're not already, that can happen, of course, as an outcome of the work. And they can be also wise. The hierarchy that is like the parent is wise, the child is not, does not have to be like artificially maintained if it doesn't apply. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad you'd be with us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Let me go to Sarah S. And then C. Henry. I might jump around a bit. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sarah, and I'm from Walnut Creek, California, which is in the Bay Area.
Yeah, I know it. Go Mount Diablo. I lived in the Bay Area for 11 years. Yeah.
Okay, yes.
I know it.
I live in space in Mount Diablo, so yes.
Mhm.
So here's my question. Almost 2 years ago, it'll be 2 years in April, my baby sister overdosed and died. And that has been, I mean, I hear it all the time in the news. I know people who have kids that have done that. It was not her intention to do that. And she was only 29. And I'm wondering, you were talking about people who took their own lives and how, it's common to see that when they get to the other side, there's still trauma there. I'm curious about people who overdose and their intention wasn't to take their life. I'm sure you've had experiences with that, right?
Yeah. There's no script on how all that goes. I mean, I think most of the time there's some very human reaction that's some version of, well, damn. Like that wasn't like the really? Like surprise, shock, disappointment, sorrow, all the things that most people would feel if they accidentally took themselves out, right? But beyond that, what happens next? That person could end up in a pretty stuck and confused place without the means to move forward. They could go through a period of time and then eventually shift and move, or they could be like, damn, and like be in that for like a couple weeks and be like, well, okay. Like if I did that, if I like, I don't know, did some like stupid shit and I accidentally like, I don't mean in a judgmental way, but like I like accidentally killed myself or something. I'd be so mad, have so many feelings about it. But at a certain point, it'd be like, well, okay, I wouldn't be that embarrassing ancestor guy who becomes the ghost. But I'd probably like pick myself up and be like, all right, well, let's do the thing, right? Become an ancestor and like move ahead. And because after going through that process of turning away from the world, you can re-engage in a new way. It's a tricky kind of backwards thing where you have to let it go to get it back. And that's scary if you're not resourced, because you have to face your life and understand that you can't have it back in that way. And that's part of why the dead need a hand sometimes. It's kind of like, yeah, you died. I love you. You got this, but you got to like finish dying and then we can hang out again. So what I would say is trust your heart level instinctual knowing about how she's doing. And if you sense that it's something other than settled, you can take steps to assist her. And if you sense that she is really deeply at peace, then just say hello. And you know. But if it doesn't feel settled from her side, then trust that you know that. And if you're asking about it, you're probably the one to bring the remedy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Does that land okay?
Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah.
Hi,
Hi.
my name is Cynthia. I'm from Texas in the United States. And it resonated with me when you were talking about how when we have those on the other side of transition and they pull from us our energy. I believe that this is kind of what has happened to me. I would say about 3 years ago, I had never even heard of ancestral veneration, never was taught anything about it and anything like that, but always had in the back of my mind that something had to exist, that something like that was happening. And then I came across somehow, I don't know, just happenstance, but not happenstance, your information and start to get interested. I signed up for the course and was starting to take it. And then I got diagnosed with cancer. And so that entire next year, I wasn't ever able to participate in the course really. But my question is, when I was diagnosed with cancer, my sister was diagnosed with cancer, like, right before I was, some months before. But when we did all the genetic testing and all those things, medically, we were not.
Oh, your sound just went out. Your sound is, I can't hear you. Can others? No, okay. Shoot. You're on mute. There we go.
Can
I
you
think
hear
you're
me?
back. I can now.
Okay.
You were
Okay.
saying
Okay.
about you both got a cancer diagnosis and your sound went out. So just back up a minute,
Oh,
like
okay.
30
We
seconds.
both got cancer diagnosis. And that's when I realized that I start thinking, it just started coming to me that pretty much all of my family, most of them on my mother's side, they passed due to cancer. I mean, so nobody or I didn't know anything about, trying to venerate ancestors. And I started to think, well, I wonder if it's not a bloodline thing because we both got tested for all the genetics, all the, all that stuff. And we were not predisposed to even ever get cancer. according medically, right? At all. Not anywhere in our nothing. So I start to think about that when you were talking about they pull from us. So I start to think, maybe they're pulling, that it's that kind of thing. And so, like I said, right. And then I didn't think it was a coincidence that right when I was getting ready to take your course, that immediately after that, I was diagnosed with the cancer and really was never able to participate. And so now I'm in remission and I'm wanting to get back interested in it, in venerating, because I do believe when you were talking about them pulling, I believe that that's, to me, I feel it's a clue for me that I'm the one that can assist with those that are healed, those on the other side, to help heal them so that it won't continue on in my bloodline with the cancer thing. So is that such a thing?
Yes,
Like,
continue ahead
okay,
on that trajectory. Yes. We are
okay.
not, yes, we're not nearly as individual as we're led to believe. And the stories will create and recreate just relentlessly. And so if we don't have a more life affirming, older, deeper, senior kind of story to the suffering story, then the suffering story will be the one that plays out. And so you can't replace a story with no story, not at first. And so there needs to be an even older story about like vitality and thriving and longevity and whatever it is. But you can't just make that up on a mind level. That doesn't get as deep as the intergenerational pattern you're looking at. So you got to go back farther and deeper. And yeah, things will it's just guiding and teaching last night in the practitioner network. It's people training to guide the ancestral healing work. And one of the things we're talking about is the intergenerational momentum and how the things build up when it's not resolved. And so the recent generations, grandparents, parents, and all that will be the recipient of all this unconscious to them momentum of dysfunction. And the body, unless we have a conscious way to honor the ancestors outside of our body, the body is the altar. Like these bodies are like the place where it happens. That's a rough way to live out the story. And yeah. So blessings on the work. Be hopeful with it. And the practitioner directory, it's on the site, and there's, if it's helpful to anybody, there's also low-income sessions. It works available in about, I think 12, 15 languages maybe, but it one-on-one sessions are also a great way to dive in if you don't have the inclination to do the online course necessarily, whatever format meets you well. Same with the book, but like find it, like dive in. The intent of those practices is for you to connect directly with your own people. It's not somebody else.
And I feel like I'm
your
called to
grandmother
them.
tells you this. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I do
No.
feel like I am, like that was my pull to it, because I tried to like kind of ignore some things I had been feeling that I was called for ancestral veneration. I didn't know that's what it was called. Okay. Because I had no foundation, no knowledge, but I just felt that I was somehow like that bridge. That's the word I kept hearing, that I'm the bridge. And until that happened to me, I was sure about it. It's just that I have zero place to start. Like I'm totally clueless about it.
Yeah, you're already in the mix. So whether you step in with a course again or do some sessions, I would try to get a little momentum with it up front. It's the shifts are more within reach than you might realize. So yeah, thanks. Good. Let's keep rolling with some of the questions. I jump around, so if I can't remember the order in which people raise their hand, like have mercy on me. I'm just hanging out, enjoying chatting people. Yeah.
Hi, me? Is it me?
It
Hi,
is.
my name is Feather, and I'm in San Francisco, thank God. And I forgot what I was gonna say. I wrote it down.
That
Um,
happens to me too. Take a
yeah,
second if you need.
there's a lot of marvels going on. I'm also trying to challenge myself to just ask the question as simply as possible, because really I'd love to just sit and talk to you for 30 hours straight. But my question is, from your framework and understanding, do parts of our living selves die and become ghosts? And for context, I've had experiences where I have witnessed from a certain perspective that parts of myself did not actually survive the extreme experiences they were having and needed some kind of tending to move to another side. So I'm just curious your perspective on that.
That's a very nuanced question. Usually not exactly like that is like the first layer. But in the case of the fragmentation of the soul or the self, which can happen with trauma or, usually for things that are difficult, occasionally, rarely, but some, it has seemed that the presentation of an aspect of self is that of being dead rather than just cut off and wounded or shut down. What I would say is it is possible to be come back from the dead as well, if we're going to speak of it in those terms. There's also the way in which the self changes and transforms, like the death of the self or ego death. This an interesting facet of that is people who make a choice or affirm what has always been, however it is for them, a change in outer identity around gender during their life. And so to refer to someone in their previously assigned identity or gender sometimes is given the name of like dead naming, like you're speaking to someone who's no longer there, that is not the self that is now. And the self that is now is usually understood to be what's always been there, but it's just been drawn forward for a more authentic, congruent life. So it's just one nuance of like the way in which we die during a life. There's like I said, the death of the ego, the transformational kind of things that happen in spiritual development. But in the fragmentation experience, it happens during trauma and things like it. If we're going to frame it such that the splintered selves can die, then I would say that we need to include resurrection in the paradigm. It's a nuanced terrain. Yeah. Like if you're going to have a magical reality, you got to dial it all the way up and include all the features. Yeah. How's that?
Something to chew on. Thank you. Thank you
Okay.
for really
Yeah.
hearing the question. Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. It's an interesting question. Yeah. Who did I say? I say Sarah next, or Carolyn. Sorry, yeah, we've been waiting for a minute, I think.
Hey there.
Hey.
Hi. This might be an edgy question for people. I don't know. This is a pretty edgy topic, so it's probably pretty good. Some people believe that there's a depopulation effort going on currently, and I'm wondering if there is, are the dead, the people that we've seen die in the last 2-3 years and who we're continuing to see die with these sudden death syndrome type thing.
I don't know. It sounds conspiracy minded. I
I
don't know what you mean. Yeah.
That's why I said it was edgy. Okay, let's just say, if there were, okay, maybe go back to Nazi Germany. If there were a depopulation effort to get rid of a certain group of people, what does that have, like, how does that affect the dead? Does that confuse them? Does that anger them? Is there, is that a type of trauma? that would happen to that group, that soul group, or those people who are affected by that? I'm curious about that.
Let me try to engage here. I thank you and respect. I don't presume to know all of where your question is coming from. I'm from Ohio. If you've been there, it's a very pragmatic sort of like place. And so I tend to, things that land for me in a conspiracy oriented way, I'm like, I don't know what that is. But again, I don't mean to presume what you're asking. So let me try to answer the question of if there is a really harmful human pattern that targets people in a dehumanizing way, and does that add any additional complexity in the post-death journey and what happens? So let me try it like that. Maybe. I mean, it depends how, like, people have died in really, really bad ways. And if they are strong in their spirit, they're going to rise up and move through it and be vibrant, even at the moment of death, and defiantly, with an open heart, look into the face of evil and be like, you're boring, and then die. And so so people are resilient and have big souls and spirits. That said, like, the energetics behind really bad, genocidal, nasty stuff by whatever name and form, those energy patterns are really predatory and dangerous and bad stuff. They're like what people mean when they say evil. And that's no good. Nobody wants that around them, you know? And so can that make things even harder in the journey after death? Yeah, it can. But I don't like to give all those, you know, baddies. That's the word that came to mind. Our daughter, she's 5. She's like, you're a baddie. Like, geez, maybe I am. I don't even know. I don't like to give those baddies like more power than they, than they already have. So it's not fundamentally different. Living in an ethical way is the best thing you can do to make sure you don't become a ghost. Because you'll reinforce the reality that we're deeply interconnected, which is what ethics arises from. And if you reaffirm that on a soul level through your actions, which are a great way to reaffirm things, while you're alive, when you die, you have good instincts. You'll navigate what follows just fine. Yeah. But sometimes there's like not very conscious, annoying people who happen to get swept up in and targeted by really otherworldly badness, and then they die, and then they're not very equipped, so they're buffeted by all the things that happen when you die. Yeah. Great. I think I said Sarah. Let's do that. We'll jump around a bit. And I'm enjoying the time. I like the Q&A time, so I'll hang out until I'm tired.
Hey, thanks a lot for this and for answering a lot of diverse questions. I guess our question relates to someone who is living, our daughter, and I'll try to just contextualize quickly. Very dramatic change in mental health over the course of 2 years, and so rapid and so severe that it feels at some point that there's like, a possession almost that's there. And this is a youth, 16-year-old, and otherwise incredibly healthy prior to this demise, this change. We've actually both done work with one of the people that's trained with you in terms of looking at ancestral lineage and getting support and working backwards through the lineages for support for this. It feels like in some ways this may have no impact at all from anything sort of supernatural, if you will, and not supernatural, like ghosts are supernatural, but from your perspective, I think very natural. It's really interesting, but so we're left with, if that's the case, how do we work with this? How do we present this idea even to her in a way that she may be able to facilitate some clearing? Or do we deal directly with the ghost that we don't even know where it's from? Or, I don't know. And just any thoughts or guidance?
Is she stabilized now?
No, not at all.
That's so hard. Sorry. It must be super hard. Well, what you can definitely do is make sure, assuming you're both, like, you're her two biological parents. I don't mean to assume that. So you're saying yes, okay. You can definitely, because it's good anyways to do, and it can only help, make sure that all of your ancestors, especially like your 4 foundational lineages, the people that come before you, are deeply healed and well in spirit. And so do your own like ancestral healing work. Like, one of the things that's important when there's a mental health crisis, or life is just like taking a really difficult like turn in a way that you're like, oh, this is like super hard, oh my God, is hold the long view. Don't forget the long view. And in that sense, clean things up really thoroughly with your own lineages, because you can control that completely. Not that you control the ancestors, but you can tend to that. So, and what you can do there is make sure that the loving and kind and wise ones from your people are blessing her and surrounding her, and that none of the trouble, if there is any trouble from any of your lineages that came before you, that's no longer reaching her. I don't presume to know that it's ancestrally sourced. It's usually complicated. But you can make sure that the ancestral layers are really well tended. And so she is like held and loved and surrounded by that, by that element of reality of the ancestors, and that you're holding her in prayer in that way. So that if she continues in a difficult way, if she dies young, if she has a full recovery and a long life, in any of those scenarios, in the long term, like if she has lives to be 95 and is a very wildly successful person, and you're like, that was a rocky phase. Even so, at that age, many years after both of you have died, she'll still receive the beneficial reverberation from that work, because the ancestors will be waiting to receive her, even if she never turns her conscious attention there during her life. So you will have created the conditions for eventual ease, even if it doesn't come until that time. And the nice thing about it is, when so many things are not in your immediate control and you want it to be better, and it doesn't shift quickly while you're doing all the 55,000 other things you're trying to do, that's something you can do. So that's encouraging in a way, even though it's not, it's more of a medium to long-term shift. Yeah. Hopefully that responds at least some. And you want, look, I don't have this view of like, well, we better request a lot of suffering so we can make a lot of wisdom out of it. But if the hard things are going to happen, we might as well hold the view of like, well, this is extremely difficult, and let me make sure that this difficulty is being converted into compassion, and that I'm not becoming resentful and bitter toward reality, and that I'm honoring the challenging gift of her path by becoming a more wise and kind person. Because you're going to meet in another way after you've all died, even if it doesn't clear up before then.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Afton and Charlotte and
Hey there. Just
Hey.
you last folks there, just sending you so much love right now. That's a lot.
yeah,
My question is probably more out of curiosity than a situation. So you had mentioned before there's we enter into death and then there's travel, like we transition to an ancestor hopefully very quickly, but we get to that point, and then to the reborn, we're all the same consciousness. Do you have thoughts around like that process from ancestor to rebirth? Is that, I've heard many times saying like the ancestors choose us. So if there's a child born, this ancestor chose to be here. We chose to be within this family or whatnot. So I guess it's almost twofold. So the ancestor to reborn, and do we always feel, or do you always feel that the reborn is of your own lineage? So when you have a child and its ancestor coming back, is it of your own lineage, or is that a big open book of awesome?
like the 90-second version on that. That's a big question. It's a good question, but how's that whole like life and death or birth thing work over there? Like, how did I get this job? Well, different traditions have different things to say about that. And I don't have some fixed view on it. The traditions that have impacted me the most are like Yoruba, West African traditions. I mean, not West African traditions, that's so broad, specifically Yoruba culture, Isheshe, West Nigerian Yoruba traditions, and Islam, and Buddhism a bit, and then just all kinds of mixed pagan, indigenous, earthy stuff. And so, as you might imagine, they have different views on this topic. But I think that the soul isn't just one thing. And so some parts of us seem to return or cycle through, or at the very least have strong affinities with other times. And other aspects of what we are really are shaped by this life. And they have a kind of, this life imprint. And after death, I don't know that there's just one thing that happens, because some aspects of what we are can go one way and others another way, and etc. And also, we're not nearly as individual as we're often sold the story that we are. And in that way, we can be both here and there. And time is also really bendy and weird. And so, to give an example, my teacher and friend Oluwo Falado Adesanya Woyade in Ibadan in Nigeria, in Yoruba land, is it's my Oluwo in Ifa tradition, my teacher. And when I was there in 2013 doing initiation to Ifa, his father had just died like 2 weeks earlier, and then within 6 months he had a son that was born. Him and his wife had their uncle, and the child was divined to be the reincarnation of the father. So it's like Baba Tunde, like Grandpa's back, and so everybody's happy about it. It's like, oh, welcome back, quick turnaround. And so I, in chatting him over the years, I'm like, just because this is your son reincarnate, he's not going to tell you what to do, right? He's like, no, of course not. And I'm meaning like you're still the dad, like he's your grandfather, but he's still your son, both and you're still going to give reverence, and you could chat it up with your grandfather in spirit, right? He's like, yeah, of course, still make offerings to him. So it's not like he stopped being there to come here. So there's a dipper from the river that's poured from that particular, current of the river that's poured back into form. And both, there's a both and. But about all that reincarnation, past life, every other thing, I'm a little bit agnostic about it. I'm pragmatic. When we're here, we got to be ourselves and be here. And that includes being connected to all kinds of weird affinities and every other thing. But so sure to all that, but it's mostly like, what are you going to do with it? Is it helping you to be a more ethical and connected person? Great, then double down on it. If not, then refocus. Yeah, no good. It's a super common question. It's like, how's all that work? I'm like, I don't know, but I know that some of the ways that we think of ourselves affect the questions we ask. So there's not just one self. Time is weird. There's reincarnation and there's not reincarnation, and it follows the bloodlines and it doesn't follow the bloodlines. Yeah, so it's more like that. Cool. All right, maybe a few other questions, Charlotte, I think, and waiting patiently, and then.
Hi. Before I took your ancestral medicine course, which was it was pivotal, enriching, life-changing in some ways. I engaged in several courses with the Foundation for Shamanic Studies. I'm sure you're familiar with them. And one course was the Psychopomp course. And I found, just my brief foray into that, where they invite you to go looking basically in the middle world. And I found it, my experience was really, really meaningful and positive. And I wonder how we reconcile that with your first point about just, don't directly engage. So that's, how do you think of the psychopomp work? Is just could be not safe? Is it like it could be risky? It could be
Psychopomp can mean a lot of different things. It's a word that is borrowed from a Greek tradition, as you probably know, that implies the guiding of a soul. And in the framework that I work from, partly because I'm in this position, which is good, but it's tricky, of rather than being a specialist and being like, I'm going to do this work for you, I'm the shamanic healer dude or whatever, I'm stealing the fire, so to speak. I'm like, you all should do it for yourselves. Let me teach you how. And which is mostly good, but also like, careful, like, here's the fire, like, hold it in this container, is going to burn you. And you're going to make the gods angry and all, all the, I don't know if it's so Promethean, but in any case, like, it's tricky also. So in the approach, the well and wise ancestors of the lineage in which you're focusing are functionally the psychopomps. They're the ones who are receiving and guiding the souls of the dead to join the well ancestors. So in that sense, it's congruent with other approaches. It's just that the ancestors are the ones who are functioning as the soul guides. That is because, in part, I'm working within the system to find the remedy for the trouble in the system, also to intentionally deconstruct the extreme individualism that we're often downloaded. And because the sneaky thing that happens with the lineage healing work is like, oh, it's not just like those ancestors over there are well. I'm part of a lineage. We are well. I'm well. We're who? Wait a minute. I'm not as individual as I thought. Good. Has all kinds of implications. Go with that. Right. And so, but yeah, as to like, are things hazardous? Of course, there's a tremendous danger in the world. Like the Foundation for Shamanic Studies has this, like, the shadow it casts when it's not proactively addressing it, is it's a very like white American kind of thing. And that, dude, I'm a white American. Like, I don't mean to throw shade in that way, but culturally, if you're not careful about it, it can have a very insensitive or even negatively impactful reverberation for indigenous folks, and fail to address the dire systemic oppression and racism and like forces of harm that are weighing on other than white people all over the world, and a lot of white people too. And so so I'm not saying you're saying that, I'm not like lumping you in with all that, but I'm saying that anytime that there's a sense, I'm not even sure if this is in your question, but I received part of it in that way. Anytime there's a sense that, things aren't that bad, or like it's actually, kind of positive and kind of safe, I'm just like, oh, you got to get out more. Like, you don't know what it's like to be hunted because of the color of your skin, like that. Like I could be blindfolded and be like, there's a white person asking this question. And so that all that's part of the spiritual practice too. I mean, expansive love, predatory evil, non-duality. What are you going to do? Like, you got to hang out with both. It's part of the same package. Yeah. So, yeah, thanks, Charlotte. It's welcome. Linda, you've been hanging out for a minute, I think, too. Hey, I'm gonna rest pretty soon, but I enjoy chatting with people.
Hi, it's been a while. You mentioned effective funerals. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Well, there's not, I don't want to suggest the short version is you give the one who's died the best possible send-off you can, and then somebody follows up later to make sure they're finding their way. And if they're not, there's some kind of intervention to make sure they do find their way. That's it. That's the short version.
So that's a personal thing that one would do, not necessarily involving everyone in the funeral.
If everyone in the funeral is on board with it, the amount of energy that can be raised for that intention is really lovely. If everyone is not on board with it, then you do it in the most subtle way you need to in order to do it personally, or just like where you just sit back and you don't fly across the country if you can't make it to the funeral, but instead you hold vigil at home and you tend to it behind the scenes. It doesn't have to happen in person necessarily, but you make sure, if you're the only one doing it, you make sure it happens. If you're like, I know this really needs to happen, and damn, I'm busy, but I have a little bit of extra resources, I'm gonna hire someone to help with it. Great, you hire someone. And if the dead person's like, who are you? Be like, I'm the person your friend hired to help you. And be like, okay, I'll go with you then. And so that it doesn't matter how the help gets there. It matters that it's rendered. Yeah. And yeah. Something else I was going to say. That's the short version of it. There was I'm thinking of a story. My teacher, who I mentioned, Aluo in Nigeria, he was visiting in North Carolina, in Nashville. I used to live there, and I was trying to explain to him the work I do, which he gets it generally, but they don't need it in the same way. Not to idealize what's happening in Nigeria, but among Yoruba traditionalists, there's not a systemic, giant, unaddressed ghost problem in the same way. It's like they got other challenges, but that's not it. And so I'm explaining to him what I'm doing, and then he tells a story of when his father was young, and his father died some years ago at age 99. But when he was young, he told my teacher a story about going to a funeral. It was like one of his aunts that died, and the woman had been dead for like a day. And it's a thing that happens in different cultures, but definitely is talked about in Yoruba culture. She's been dead for a day, and they're doing the funeral. And then in spirit, she had gone. It's like making her way to the other reality. But outside the gate, there's someone that died when she was young. So one of her aunties who was outside the gate, and it's just like, you need to go back and tell those people that I'm still sitting outside the gate. They didn't do a good funeral for me, so they need to handle it. And then so she sits up after being dead for a day and is like, yo, this person just said you didn't handle it, so handle it. And then goes back to being dead. And then they're like, oh, well, we better handle it. So they do like a double funeral and make sure that the person who died a while ago and the person who just got, started dying are both tended to. And he's like, you mean like that? I'm like, yes, that's basically what I mean on a large scale. He's like, oh, sorry, Baba. Sorry that's happening for you all. I'm like, yeah, so am I. But but the funny thing is what he's saying also, besides like, this isn't that common for us. He's saying the first go-to is to do the ritual work that should have happened at the funeral later. He's saying, why didn't the funeral take care of that? Oh, the funerals aren't being done very well. So then do it well. Oh, we forgot how. We broke our culture and then exported brokenness out on other people. Sorry, European colonialism. We forgot how in the 1400s or whatever. It's like, well, fucking figure it out then. We could just like start again, figure it out. Yeah, I know. So I'm trying. So the outer form isn't the important part. It's that you actually effectively assess if the one who's died is making their way. And if you assess that they have not, then you help them. If you assess that they have, then like fist bump, you'd be happy for them. Like, nice work. That's it.
Thank you.
The outer ritual should be in service to that. Yeah.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks, Linda. Yeah. I'm waning a bit, but let me see, Pauline, and then take it. Yeah, see where I'm at there. I can't hear you. You're off mute, but your sound isn't coming through. Do you have another way to do it? You gotta unplug something or flip a switch, something. Give it another try. 3, 2, 1. Let me go to Brooke. See if you can. Yeah, I still can't hear you. You can try typing it in if you want. Yeah, Brooke.
Hi, thank you so much for everything that you're sharing. It's very soothing. I lost my best friend of 22 years at the end of May, and I feel kind of like lost in terms of knowing where she's at on her journey. And I'm, like hearing what you're saying about how we're not as separate as we think we are. And maybe like I'm not disconnected from her journey in the way that I think I am. I'm wondering like when she's going through this process of like reaching the gate of the ancestors, like, is she inaccessible to me during that time? And how also, if so, like, how do I know if she's come back and is ready to hang out again, as you said?
Yeah, it's a great question. A lot of cultures will prescribe something like a year of turning away between the living and the dead as a general guideline. It's like, give them a year. Don't mess with it. If they come to you and they're like, I'm so good, I'm connected to expansive divine love, I've become the source of God and good things, like, let's chat. Well, then don't be rude. Be like, well, you seem fine, so let's chat. But if that hasn't happened and you're in the role of mostly like sitting back and not intervening, so you're like, well, I'm not getting all involved in it, but I'd be happy to hear from you if you're well, but otherwise I'm giving it space. Then give it a year, because that is a lot of the rituals of like, all right, now we're going to come out of mourning, or we're going to make sure everything's well, we're going to like open the oven and see if it's cooked kind of thing, then that it'll be at a year more or less. So that hasn't been a year yet. You could, if you felt like it, you wanted to kind of push at it a little bit, be intuitively curious, but I hear that it's hard to get a read on it could be from your own grief. It could be because you're having an accurate read on a non-clear situation, and it feels non-clear because it's not clear. That's not your own non-clarity. That's an accurate perception of some non-clarity going on over there. So it's hard to, unless you're used to looking at those things, it's hard to tell the difference. And even if you are, if something's close to you, it's easy to have it be kind of blurry. But what you can do is just wish well for her. May she be at peace. It's kind of like sending, blessings without pulling the attention of that one to you. You can even picture, like, I want to make a charitable donation to this person's ancestors on behalf of her journey. It's like you're not even drawing any attention to you. You're just saying, may goodness happen over there. I'm not getting involved. May goodness happen. And I'm ready if the conditions support reconnection. So I would hold that stance for a year. And if a year's passed and there's still not a clear sense of it, consider if it's your role to help, if there's help needed. When you've died and none of your family has a framework to help, and you actually need a little help because you keep making a left turn or a right turn and you're like, damn, nobody taught me what to do and now I'm dead. Like, it's not that straightforward. I'm in the house of memories and I can't find my way out. A good friend will do just fine. So you might need some kind of help when you get in that condition. That's what I mean about the cultural abandonment of the dead. It's bad news. I'm not suggesting that applies in this situation, but take it as, give it a year unless you want to get more involved. And after that time, be willing to help if help is needed. Yeah. Thanks, Brooke, and kindness and your friends passing. Oh, let me take a last question from Pauline, who's been waiting, I think. And then I'm going to rest because it's late here in Granada. You there, Pauline? Oh, where'd you go? Oops, I think I meant to take you off mute, but I unraised your hand instead. Give it another try if you're still here. Maybe raise your hand again. Sorry about that. Audio still not working. That's right. We had that process. Sorry. Yeah. Christy, and then we'll wrap up. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah. Hey.
Hi. I'm at the beach, so sorry if the background noise is noisy. My question is, for myself, I'm guided to clear land and like spaces of, I don't know, I guess they're souls. I don't see them, but I feel them. And I'll just give you an example. Like whenever I visit South Carolina, I was always guided to go to this one particular plantation. And each time that I went there, just intuitively, I would just listen and I would find myself clearing land or like communing with the trees and, acknowledging their suffering due to things that humanity has done to them. Or like I could be at a bonfire and just sitting there with the fire, and then all of a sudden I find myself like communing with witches and end up honoring their lives. So things like that. I don't really know my question because I don't have anyone in my personal space to talk to about this. So it's really my first time saying this out loud to anyone. I don't know how to navigate it. I don't know what it is. It's just something that's instinctive in me. So I guess my question would be like, how do I navigate it, or like, why
Yeah,
do I
that's
have
good.
like this gift, or what? I don't know.
Oh, you should get some training. You'd like it, actually. I don't mean to laugh. I'm picturing, I'm trying to think of a good metaphor, and it's like, it's like I got this house and I got this lightning rod on top and I got this things wired, and like if I like am in the right weather, I can light up the whole house, and there's batteries, and but it's like you're an electrician winging it, and you can, but it's like there's a whole like there's tech for that. You would enjoy, like you would drink it up to hang out with people who are like, oh no, we have like really set cables and all kinds of ways to work with that. So there's a ton of energy. Like pick your part of the world. If you're like, I really want the training and the flavor of it to be, Peruvian, African, European, generalized, you can, if it matters to you that it comes in a certain form, you have it in that form, but get some training if you're open, because the particular skill set of bringing remedy to places where there's historical harm and pain, to the human dead who are suffering, to just the larger interface between the seen and the unseen to humans' realities. People have been working full time in those terrains for as long as there's been people, humans I'm talking. And so the training is really available, the support on it. And you could keep winging it. I'm not suggesting, obviously, that you're somehow doing something wrong, but I'm saying that the advantage to the training is that you would probably be able to engage more impactfully even in the terrain you're already instinctively engaging in, by having a framework and allies and colleagues and people you can coordinate with. So in that way, it's an active like self-respect or giving a valuing of these capacities that you already are walking with in the world, because the work you're describing doing of bringing love and healing, luminosity to places of historic oppression and harm that continue to carry that density. That's important work. You know that, or you wouldn't be doing it, but it's important work. But people ask somebody asked in the chat, it was fine. How do we find trainings? I'm going to be really cheeky and try ancestralmedicine.org. Really, it's it's late in the call, so I'm going to indulge that self-promotional moment, but it is my life work to create accessible, culturally coherent, effective ritual technology that is widely shareable. And so that's that whole stack of courses. If you go to the courses tab at the top, that includes a lot of ways to engage. And then if you're like, yeah, but I want a living person, go one button over and see the practitioner network. And those like 100 or so practitioners, those people are great. And a lot of them have all different kinds of skills and training. And so if you're like, I like it this way, well, you can have it that way. Be like, no, but I want it in German. Okay, then go to the German practitioners, or the Austrian ones. So there's options. But crash around with some courses and teachers. It doesn't have to be perfect. None of my teachers are perfect people. I'm not a perfect person. Just needs to be good enough. to move you along. Yeah. So good. Let me glance this last thing Pauline just sent me in the chat because you couldn't get your mic to work. I hope that landed okay, Christy, and then we'll wrap up. That you intuitively see the deaths of people. And I think you mean like in advance of them dying. But when you do that, you feel like you are connecting with them. And some of those connections you feel like you've carried for years. Is that part of the boundary stuff and clearing out the spirits who don't feel healed? Yeah, probably. I mean, look, if you're naturally psychic, and some people are, your options are like, try to push it away, be like, no, thank you. You might be able to do that. Probably won't. It'll probably cause bad impact, but maybe not. You can be like, I don't want it. Occasionally gifts can be removed. And then there's the just kind of roll with it in the I'm passively psychic, but don't want to do anything about it way. My mom is kind of like that. It's a bit annoying, but just like get some training, lady, and respect her. And and then there's the get trained element. And advantage of getting some training if you're naturally psychic is that you can learn how to turn it on and off to a degree, at least, depending on the nature of it. You can regulate it a bit, and you can learn to make sure that you're having good boundaries as much as you're able. And if you are just going to be boundary diffuse and porous because that is your setting and you can't fight your temperament that much, then you learn how to cleanse that. You learn how to what I mean is to keep your field clear and to accept your limitations, that you need to surround your life as much as you can with very positive and safe energy, so that you can be in a state like you come to a surrender and peace with your temperament and your calling. This is what I'll wrap with. It's our responsibility to get clear about our destiny, about our particular calling or gifts and what we need to be spending time with. Because we only have so much time. And the more clarity we have about that, the more we're going to understand what we need to do then, and who we need to connect with, what training we need, etc. Into the response, is that it? Get training. Kind of. When I say get training, there's a bigger piece, which is reckon with God about your destiny. Be like, is this part of my gifts in the world? Or did I just like have a weird childhood and now I can see things? Or both. And if the response is like, no, that's part of your gifts. And it's like, okay, you're a very instinctively talented musician. And so then I'm like here saying, well, you should find a music teacher. You would enjoy it. Like you'd feel seen by it. You're like, okay, is that it? Be like, yeah, no, that's the next step. And then it'll unfold from there. Because it's a bigger topic about destiny, but the way it comes is like a trail of breadcrumbs usually. So you just have to move toward it. If you want it all at once, you get too freaked out and be like, oh, I'm not doing it. Like, that's why we don't tell you all at once. You get scared and freaked out. So anyways, good. I appreciate you all. Thanks for hanging out a bit. I know we've been here, and come to the course if you want, and it's fine. If not, stick around, join some stuff. Have a good rest of your day, and be friendly to the ghosts. Okay. Take care.